What if physical pain was never meant to become the ruler of your inner world? What if Jesus, in the final and most painful hours of his life, revealed something we rarely notice? The body can suffer while something deeper within remains anchored in peace. There is an ancient Aramaic idea we are going to explore through the word IDTA. Its importance is not that it magically removes pain, but that it opens a question almost everyone who has suffered has asked: can I experience pain without allowing pain to become everything I am? Because there is a difference between pain in the body and suffering that consumes the entire inner world. When we look carefully at Jesus, especially as he approached the cross, we discover something extraordinary. He did not deny physical suffering or pretend that agony was not real. He entered suffering without surrendering his deepest connection to the Father. And that distinction may completely change the way we understand the relationship between physical pain and spiritual peace. Stay with me until the end, because we will connect IDTA with another powerful Aramaic word you may already recognize: shlama, peace, wholeness, inner completeness. Together, these ideas reveal a different way of walking through moments when the body hurts. And then I will show you a simple spiritual practice you can use when physical discomfort appears and the mind begins following the pain into fear. The purpose is not to deny what the body feels, but to discover whether peace can remain present even when pain has not yet disappeared. Pain changes the way we experience time. 5 peaceful minutes can disappear without being noticed, but 5 minutes of physical discomfort can feel endless. Suddenly, attention becomes trapped inside the body, and everything else seems to disappear. This is one reason physical pain can become more than a sensation. The body sends its signal, but almost immediately the mind begins adding questions. How long will this last? What if it becomes worse? What if something is wrong? What if I cannot endure this? And this is where pain and suffering begin to intertwine. One belongs to the immediate physical experience, while the other can continue growing through fear, resistance, memory, and anticipation of what might happen next. Now consider Jesus in Gethsemane. The Gospel does not describe a man disconnected from his body or untouched by what was approaching. Quite the opposite. Jesus openly encounters anguish before the suffering of the cross has even reached its physical climax. This matters because the ancient Christian tradition does not require us to imagine holiness as pretending not to hurt. What we encounter in Jesus is something far more human. He experiences distress, acknowledges what is happening, and still remains oriented toward the Father. That distinction becomes the doorway into our exploration of IDTA. We are not searching for a magical word that switches off physical sensation. We are searching for another way of understanding what happens inside us when suffering reaches the body. The deeper question is whether physical suffering must also conquer the entire person. Your body can say, "This hurts," while something deeper within you can still say, "I am here." And pain has not become everything that I am. Between those two realities, an unexpected space can begin to open. Fear no longer needs to speak louder than everything else. And pain can remain a real experience without becoming the entire story of your inner life. To understand IDTA, we first need to remove one dangerous assumption about the ancient world. Aramaic spirituality did not always divide human experience into the neat categories through which modern people often understand body, mind, and spiritual life. Body, breath, inner life, and spiritual awareness belong to an interconnected human experience. And when we begin looking at suffering through that ancient perspective, the question we ask about physical pain also begins to change. Instead of asking only, "How do I make this sensation disappear?" we can ask something deeper. What happens inside me while this sensation is present? And what part of me am I allowing this pain to control? This is where IDTA becomes important for our journey. Not as a medical formula, and not as evidence that Jesus secretly taught a technique for eliminating pain. Instead, it becomes a doorway into the embodied world in which his teachings were originally heard. Imagine physical pain arriving like a wave. Our instinct is often immediate resistance. The shoulders tighten, breathing changes, the jaw contracts, and attention narrows until the painful sensation seems to occupy almost everything we can perceive. Then something else happens. The mind begins predicting the next wave before it has even arrived, and suffering becomes not only what is happening in the present moment, but also what we fear might happen 5 minutes, 5 hours, or 5 days from now. Now look again at Jesus in Gethsemane. He does not pretend the approaching suffering is pleasant, call physical pain an illusion, or celebrate agony for its own sake. He acknowledges what is before him and continues turning his inner attention toward the Father. That movement is essential to everything that follows, because the spiritual transformation of our relationship with pain does not begin by saying, "I feel nothing." It begins by recognizing, "This pain is present, but this pain is not the entirety of my being." And this brings us toward the Aramaic counterpoint that will complete our journey. Shlama carries us beyond the simple idea of relaxation toward peace, wholeness, and an inner state that suffering does not necessarily have the power to destroy. And here the mystery becomes much deeper, because divine peace may not always begin only after pain ends. Perhaps there is a kind of peace that can begin while the storm is still passing through the body. And this is precisely where the journey from IDTA toward Shlama begins. If you want to discover more of the words of Jesus in Aramaic, we created our Aramaic wisdom guides, especially for you. The link is in the comments. And we're truly grateful. Your purchase helps us keep this channel going to understand the journey from pain to peace. We need to return to one of the most vulnerable moments in the life of Jesus. Before the nails, before the cross, and before the physical wounds, there was Gethsemane, a place where suffering was already entering his awareness. The Gospel of Mark describes Jesus as deeply distressed and troubled, and his words reveal the intensity of that moment. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." There is no attempt to disguise anguish behind spiritual language or pretend that faith makes suffering unreal. This detail changes everything, because Jesus does not begin his encounter with suffering by denying what he feels. He recognizes the weight of the moment, allows the reality of his distress to be acknowledged, and then brings that experience into the presence of the Father. Notice the sequence carefully. Recognition comes before surrender, and surrender comes before peace. Jesus does not need to convince himself that the cup is easy. He openly asks whether it can pass from him while remaining anchored in his relationship with the Father. This offers us an important way of approaching IDTA. When pain enters the body, our first spiritual response does not have to be resistance, shame, or the belief that we have somehow failed because we are hurting. Acknowledgement itself can become the beginning of a different relationship with suffering. You can recognize what is happening without becoming what is happening. You can say, "There is pain in my body, and I do not want this pain," while still remembering that the painful sensation is occurring within a life that is larger than this single moment. This is not surrendering to illness, nor is it refusing appropriate care. It is the recognition that fighting the existence of every painful sensation can add another layer of inner struggle to something the body is already carrying. Gethsemane, therefore, gives us a pattern. Acknowledge, remain present, and return your attention to God. The external circumstances may not immediately change, but something within can begin to move from resistance toward trust. And this prepares us for the second Aramaic key, because the opposite of being consumed by pain is not necessarily the immediate disappearance of pain. The deeper possibility is Shlan, a peace, capable of existing even when circumstances have not yet become peaceful. Now we arrive at the heart of this journey. If IDTA brings our attention toward the embodied experience of suffering, Shlama points us towards something the human heart has searched for across generations: peace that is deeper than favorable circumstances. Shlama is related to the somatic world of peace, completeness, and wholeness. It suggests more than simply having no conflict around you. It invites us to imagine an inner life being gathered back together when fear, pain, and uncertainty are pulling attention in different directions. This distinction matters enormously when the body hurts. We often tell ourselves, "I will have peace when this stops," making peace dependent upon the disappearance of every uncomfortable sensation and every frightening uncertainty. But the life of Jesus presents a more demanding possibility. Peace can coexist with vulnerability, trust can coexist with uncertainty, and communion with God can remain present even when the body is passing through an experience we would never willingly choose. Think about what happens when pain appears. Attention contracts around the sensation. Fear begins predicting the future, and the mind can travel far beyond what is actually happening in the present moment. Shlama invites the movement in the opposite direction. Instead of allowing the painful sensation to occupy your entire inner landscape, you gently return to breath, presence, prayer, and the awareness that your identity remains larger than what your body is experiencing right now. You might quietly recognize, there is pain here, but there is also breath. There is fear here, but there is also God. There is uncertainty here, but this moment does not contain my entire future. This does not make pain imaginary, and it does not guarantee that physical symptoms will disappear. It changes the spiritual relationship surrounding the experience by refusing to allow suffering to become the only voice speaking inside you. And this is the movement represented by our central message, from pain to divine peace. Not necessarily from pain to immediate physical relief, but from being internally possessed by suffering toward a place where pain and peace are no longer understood as absolute opposites. Perhaps this is why the image of Jesus facing suffering remains so powerful after 2,000 years. The body can be wounded while love remains. The circumstances can be unbearable while connection with the Father remains. And if Shlama can begin before every problem has disappeared, then an extraordinary possibility opens before us. Peace is no longer waiting somewhere on the other side of suffering. Divine peace can begin here, in the very place where you thought peace was impossible. If this ancient teaching is awakening your curiosity, there's much more to discover. Our Aramaic wisdom guides take you deeper into the words of Jesus and their original meanings. You'll find the link in the comments. There is a moment when physical pain can begin producing something beyond the sensation itself. The body hurts, but then the mind travels ahead of the body, imagining what might happen tomorrow, next week, or months from now. Pain becomes fear of pain. This distinction is important because the present sensation and the story surrounding it are not always the same thing. You may be experiencing discomfort now, while your mind is simultaneously carrying memories of yesterday and predictions about what the next painful moment could bring. This is where the movement from IDTA toward Shlama becomes practical. Instead of demanding that the body immediately become comfortable, begin by noticing what belongs to this moment and what has been added by fear, anticipation, and the desire to control what has not yet happened. Return again to Jesus. He knew suffering was approaching, yet he repeatedly returned to prayer rather than allowing anticipation alone to become his final inner destination. His attention moved from anguish toward relationship, surrender, and trust in the Father. When pain appears, you can practice a similar movement. Acknowledge what the body is experiencing without exaggerating or denying it, and then gently separate the sensation you feel now from the frightening future your mind may already be constructing around it. This does not mean ignoring persistent or severe symptoms, and spiritual practice should never replace appropriate medical care. It means refusing to give tomorrow's imagined suffering permission to occupy today's entire inner world. Shlama begins when attention returns from the frightening future to the present moment. The pain may still speak, but another voice becomes audible beside it. The quiet recognition that you are still breathing, still present, and still held within the presence of God. And sometimes the first movement toward divine peace is simply this: not asking your body to promise that tomorrow will be painless, but allowing your soul to discover that it does not have to live tomorrow's pain today. Now we can bring everything together into a simple spiritual practice. This is not a technique for curing physical conditions or switching off pain. It is a way of returning the inner life toward Shlama. When discomfort begins pulling your attention toward fear, first, become still in whatever position is reasonably comfortable. Do not fight the body or force your breathing into an unnatural rhythm. Simply notice that breath is still moving through you and allow your attention to remain with the present moment. Then acknowledge the sensation without turning it into your identity. Silently recognize, there is pain in my body right now, but I am more than this sensation. You are not denying the pain. You are placing it inside a larger awareness. Now bring Ida into your awareness as the symbol of this embodied encounter. Let it remind you that suffering is being experienced within the body, while your entire inner world does not have to collapse into that single physical experience. Then slowly turn toward Shlama. As you breathe naturally, allow the word to become an invitation. Peace, wholeness, completeness. Do not demand that the sensation disappear before you permit yourself to experience even a small measure of inner quiet. Finally, bring your attention toward God And remember the pattern we saw in Jesus: acknowledgement, presence, surrender, and trust. You might simply pray, "Father, this is what I feel. Remain with me here and lead my heart toward your peace." Remain there for a few moments without measuring whether the practice has worked. The purpose is not to defeat the body, but to stop fighting yourself while the body is already carrying something difficult. This is the bridge from IDTA toward Shlama. Pain acknowledged without becoming identity. Fear observed without becoming prophecy. And the heart returning gently toward divine peace. One last reminder: if you want to go deeper into the words of Jesus in Aramaic, your guides are waiting for you. The link is in the comments. Perhaps the deepest lesson of this journey is not that spiritual strength makes the body incapable of suffering. The story of Jesus reveals something more profound. Physical pain can be real while our deepest connection with God remains alive. This is the movement we have explored through IDTA and Shlama. One brings our attention to the embodied experience of suffering, while the other points toward peace, wholeness, and an inner life that does not have to be completely conquered by pain. When difficult moments come, remember the pattern of Jesus in Geth. He acknowledged anguish, remained present, brought what he was experiencing before the Father, and continued forward without pretending that suffering was something other than what it was. You can practice the same movement. Recognize what your body is experiencing, seek appropriate care when necessary, and refuse to let fear write the entire story of what tomorrow will become. Then return gently to Shlama. Breathe, become present, and remember that pain may occupy one part of this moment without being allowed to occupy your entire identity, your entire future, or your entire relationship with God. Where the journey, and perhaps this is the meaning behind the journey promised at the beginning, from pain to divine peace. Not because every physical sensation instantly disappears, but because suffering no longer receives the final word over the inner life. If this message found you during a difficult season, write Shlama in the comments as a simple declaration of peace. And if you want to continue discovering the ancient Aramaic world behind the teachings of Jesus, you will find the Aramaic Wisdom Guide in the pinned comment. Remember this: whenever pain tries to become your entire world, the body may hurt. The road may be difficult, but within that moment you can still turn toward God. And there, quietly and patiently, Shlama can begin.